everybody, I'm Claire and welcome to my video blog. Today is the last day before the EU referendum here in the United Kingdom, and it's got pretty intense recently. Now this is probably going to be my last video before that, and I want to concentrate not on some detail or some aspect of policy, or even on the details of sovereignty, but the overarching thing even above that, which is what seems to be happening, what I believe is happening at the archetypal level, what's going on here. My thoughts on this were triggered off yesterday when I saw that George Soros had been issuing warnings, which most of us might see as threats, to suggesting that there could be a run on the pound, there could be a recession if we vote to leave, all these things, just, you know, doom and gloom. But this is George Soros. Now remember who George Soros is, right? This is the guy who basically single-handedly destroyed the exchange rate mechanism in 1992, and he managed to make a cool profit of $4 billion at the expense of the Bank of England and the exchequer that we paid for, basically. And now he's threatening us with another one of those, basically. And so I think it really does show desperation on their part that they would uncloak to such a degree as this. George Soros, he is probably not the very apex of the covert, architects of the New World Order. Probably goes somewhere through the Rothschilds and even further behind that. But he's certainly the top frontman that we see, kind of Bilderberg spokesperson. And he's also been involved in the Syrian thing. I think I mentioned that in a previous video. So what I want to really go further on with this is thinking about all the people who have told us it's going to be the end of the world if we don't remain in the EU. So what have we got? We've got President Obama dropped in to remind us. President Obama, who's made such a success of his country over the last few years, particularly in the last couple of years. Then coming home, we have, of course, Tony Blair. Tony Blair, who managed to unseat John Major from number 10 Downing Street and the Prime Ministership in 1997. And so they are both together on that. Of course, Gordon Brown, Blair's Chancellor, who had a short tenancy at number 10 before losing rather ignominiously at an election that he should have won. And who else have we got? Oh yes, Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson, the architect of the New Labour project. Now I think it was Mandelson, or one of his cronies at least, but I think it was Mandelson who said in the late 90s we went out hunting for immigrants to come into this country. It was certainly a New Labour person, and Mandelson was very much keen on all that. Of course, Blair was the person who opened up the floodgates of immigration. And then who else have we got? Oh, well, of course, Cameron, right? So we've got the last 4 prime ministers, including the present one, who all agree on this. They all had different, policies and everything. So what we see here is, oh yeah, and then of course I'll just add, I believe Jean-Claude Juncker's, one of the several presidents of the EU, I believe is paying us a visit today, or if he hasn't actually landed in the country, he's certainly been making comments about it. Oh yes, and then the last thing is Cameron apparently yesterday broke the electoral rules in actually making a statement outside of number 10 Downing Street telling us that we should vote Remain. So, what's all this? I don't need to go on into any more details. I think I've just basically managed to demonstrate how the elite, the political ruling class, are all in favour of us staying in. So, for me, that in itself is a simple reason why we really need to get out, because all these people, if they all agree on one thing, that we should stay in, then we should get out. Now, where I want to take this is that they are putting us, we are in a situation where we are at an archetypal moment in history. The choices are stark. We go either one way or we go another, and they are completely different ways. There is no sitting on the fence. There is also no status quo option. Some people will say, well, it could just remain the same if we remain in the EU, but of course it won't, because it is their intention to pursue a superstate which will, sooner or later, faster or slower, it will dissolve the nature of Great Britain, the United Kingdom, the various parts of it that make up the entirety of who we are, and they want to create a superstate which, of course, gets into just an unelected bureaucracy that is an autocratic and totalitarian government of which we have no say. So we're getting into the realms here now. I want to get into the realms of talking about, this is metaphysical evil, right? And the way that they have exploited the Joe Cox murder. I shall put a couple of links at the bottom of this, because there's actually some very, very strange stuff coming out. My speculation on a false flag seems to, well, I'm not the only person who's thought about it, and there's other people who have looked into it and seen a lot of funny coincidences. It's a strange coincidence, for instance, the fact that as I'm, the very day I'm making this video, the day before the referendum, this was Joe Cox's birthday. I believe she was going to be 42. And also, strangely enough, the chap who tried to save her and got a knife in his liver or something, he also had his birthday today. And I don't watch television, but I'm fairly certain from what people tell me that there are going to be lots of coverage of Joe Cox's funeral, which, you know, quite often funerals take 2 or 3 weeks to organise, but they managed to get it in 6 days, pretty quick. Get it in the day before the referendum. Not making any political capital out of this, are we? So, what I think's being done here is some really, really serious attempts at emotional manipulation for ends that are fairly clear to a lot of people, and it's not, as some people would suggest, about capitalism, because otherwise why would people like James Dyson and the chairman of JCB, 2 very, very successful companies, say that they think we're better out, and the head of the CBI, I think it was the chairman of the CBI, Confederation of British Industry, concurred with John Cleese, who many of us believe to be our greatest and most famous comedic actor of many years, and both of them say almost identical things. We would like to stay in the EU, but we believe that it's unreformable, so we cannot stay in, because if we stayed in, we would have to be able to reform it, and we can't reform it, so we have to leave. And this is the nature of this. It's a parasitic beast. It's a parasitic political entity that's grown out of the political cupidity of a certain class of political bureaucrats who have exploited the reconstruction of Europe after the Second World War and to turn it into this thing, and it's been planned for a very long time. And I would suggest that what they're doing is that they're trying at the present time to put us into an emotional state. Whether Joe Cox was a false flag or not, it's certainly something they have exploited to the hilt. There's been more stuff from Will Straw coming out, apparently. And to me, this is what they're trying to do. Is that it reminded me, when I was thinking about this last night, what it reminded me of was, there's an old movie with Christopher Lee from the 60s, I think it is, of a Dennis Wheatley novel, and it's a novel about the Duke de Richelieu, and he was fighting the evil powers of black magic, and at one point they're being attacked by the evil powers, and they draw a circle, and he says to his friends, he says, if we stay inside this circle, we will be safe. So just don't step outside the circle, don't step out. Whatever happens, they will try and do things that will lead you to get out of the circle. If you get out of the circle, you're lost. And we're lost as well, because the circle's broken, right? So what happens, they have to kind of, go from dawn to dusk, from dusk to dawn all night, I think. And all these apparitions come, giant spider and everything, and Christopher Lee holds everybody firm, keep your nerve. And then the child of the woman who's in the circle with them comes through the door of the room, into the room. And she says, Mummy, I'm frightened, can you come to me, please? And then there's the spider there, probably, or something, that's going to get the child. And the mother goes, I want to go and get my child, I want to get... And Christopher Lee says, no, it's only an illusion. Don't step out of the circle. Because if you step out of the circle, we're all lost. So what's this to do with what we have now? What we have now is we are... The Leave camp are like the people in the circle. They know that if they can survive through the night, that they can make it. But we're all being mind-gamed, we're all being fear-tripped, we're all being grief-tripped, guilt-tripped, manipulated from strong emotions which are exploited, oh yeah, that's what Will Straw, Jack Straw's son, he had a logo that showed a broken heart, and it said, oh, remain tolerant, remain peaceful, as if, oh, it's all those people who want to leave the EU, who are there, the terrible people who want to be intolerant and be horrible and nasty, and all those people, and blatantly throwing this out to try and manipulate people's emotions. Everybody saying, oh, this is what Joe would have wanted, and then there's the attempt to cancel the referendum. There was a poll, there was an online poll trying to get the necessary number of figures to postpone or cancel the referendum because, we mustn't offend the memory of Joe Cox, who, it has now come out, spent more time campaigning for the rights of people in foreign countries than she did for her own people, and the day that the story of her death was being put out, over a dozen Asian Muslims 11 miles down the road were being sentenced, and I think it might have even been Leeds Crown Court, and were sentenced to, I think it was 130 years for abuse of a white girl. Over a dozen men abusing one child. I mean, high numbers are bad as well, but when you think of that number of men, it's disgusting. But that was killed. There's been a concerted attack from certain quarters, suggesting that putting out tweets, kill Michael Farage. Nobody's saying anything about that, and so we've entered a level, an archetypal level, where they're trying to steer us away through guilt, fear, manipulation, exploited emotion, away from what we know is right, but hoping that some people will be weak-willed, weak-minded, will be taken away from this, which has nothing to do with the reasons of why we should be in the EU or not, and I believe not. And it has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with the reasons why we should be in it. How can somebody getting murdered have something to do with any, rational political movement? And it reminds me also, friends who know me will know that I'm a big Tolkienist. I think if only people understood Tolkien, we wouldn't be in this situation. The Lord of the Rings is like a metaphor of what we are going through today. We are Gondor. We are under attack by the hordes of Mordor. This is what it is. And the voices that tell us we should remain are the voice of Saruman. The voice of Saruman, sweet, beguiling. Just want to bring you into their camp and make you feel ashamed of your strong feelings, that you don't want to be associated with those evil people who want to break things up now, do you? You want to be under our command, part of the one state, the one super state, the EU, which is the fool's Europe. And we have to break that hypnotic control. We have to break it. This is nothing to do with emotions which are being exploited and manipulated. In fact, they are, the way that that's being exploited and manipulated shows that these people are the real dark side, the evil empire. And I know this might sound a little bit, hyperbolic to some, but that is, I believe, and I will leave this video up. If we lose, I will leave this video up and people will see, hopefully. Well, maybe I'll be wrong, but if I'm proved right, that it would be a very, very long slide down a very slippery slope into a very dark abyss that we would have to fight very, very hard and very, very long to get out of, because we would be abdicating our powers, abdicating our autonomy. This is a major fork in the road for the human race. Britain is one of the most advanced countries. Some people would argue historically that Britain is the most developed country in the world in many respects. And so this is a challenge for the human race, the spear tip of the human race. Challenge this in this. Can we see this deception? Are we sufficiently evolved in our self-responsibility and autonomy to be able to say, no, now is the time to be sovereign, to be independent, not to be mind-gamed, not be manipulated and guilt-tripped into doing what we think will, be politically correct. It's all a big, big, big deception. These people, they're like, I was thinking about this last night, it was like they're vampires. They're vampires, and vampires, if a vampire wants to come in your house, you have to invite it. If you don't invite it, the vampire doesn't get inside the house, right? So what this is if we vote to remain, we're inviting the vampires into the house. But if we vote to leave, we're voting, no, you can't come in the house. I have a kind of similar image. It's like a bunch of, it's like a bunch of con men or abusers or even paedophiles who are drooling over some child that they want to exploit, take away, or perhaps even, you know, abuse. And they're probably, you know, they're approaching the adoption agency, and they're saying, oh, we really want to look after this child, we really want to take it and everything. And then the moment that the form is signed to give the authority to have power over this child is gone, then they will pounce. And I believe this is where we're at. This is a moral choice. This is a moral choice between self-responsibility and abdication to an evil tyranny. And if you abdicate to an evil tyranny, then you are approving of that evil tyranny. And they want to trick us into this. They want to trick our emotions. Leave, Brexit was doing so well, and then that moment it all happened. We've got to snap out of it. We've got to remember who we are. We have to vote leave. We have to stop being held under this hypnotic control of exploitation of emotions, exploitation of grief. It's nothing to do with that. Leave it behind. The people who want to exploit that are the real dark side. They are the real evil people. Ignore them. Don't let them emotionally manipulate you. Tweak on your heartstrings. It's another drowned boy on the beach, just at the convenient moment. Let's exploit it. No! Put it aside and vote leave. This is the moment. This is the moment of truth. If we don't leave, then we cannot complain about what happens afterwards. Or at least the people who voted Remain cannot complain. So please, 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 it's a moral choice. It's a metaphysical choice. Are we ready to move on to the next level of responsibility and autonomy and take our own path? Or are we going to be serfs to the dictatorship of the EU? Thank you for watching. Vote leave tomorrow. Thank you. If we vote to leave, all these things, just, you know, doom and gloom. But this is George Soros. Now, remember who George Soros is, right? This is the guy who basically single-handedly destroyed the exchange rate mechanism in 1992, and he managed to make a cool profit of $4 billion at the expense of the Bank of England and the Exchequer. What's going on here? My thoughts on this were triggered off yesterday when I saw that George Soros had been issuing warnings, which most of us might see as threats, to suggesting that there could be a run on the pound, there could be a recession that we paid for, basically. And now he's threatening us with another one of those, basically. And so I think it really does show desperation on their part that they would uncloak to such a degree as this. George Soros, he is probably not the very apex of the covert, you know. Concentrate not on some detail or some aspect of policy, or even on the details of sovereignty, but the overarching thing even above that, which is what seems to be happening, what I believe is happening at the archetypal level. Everybody, I'm Claire and welcome to my video blog. Today is the last day before the EU referendum here in the United Kingdom, and it's got pretty intense recently. Now this is probably going to be my last video before that, and I want to